What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is Beyond the Box Score on Monday, recapping Philadelphia and Green Bay and getting ready for Deshaun Watson's return. What about Saquon, Barkley, and Alvin Kamara? Can we start these guys going forward? How much do we trust Isiah Pacheco? And more to talk about here. Of course, some advanced stats. When was the last time the three of us were together? We didn't do it together last week, did we?
2 weeks ago, I think. Or no, maybe no.
No, I feel like it was 3 weeks ago. I feel like one time Jacob was sick. One time Dan was too cool.
Never too cool. Just
I agree with that. That's a good point.
You were back.
Where the hell were you last week? Anyway, it is.
I have a lot going on, Adam.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right, so yeah, let's just go. Philadelphia 40, Green Bay 33. Aaron Rodgers ribs says he's going to play next week, but Schneier, this is, I think, a potential nightmare for Packers fantasy assets, because even if he plays and then he's got a bye after that, so hopefully he can get healthy. It seems so realistic. It seems so possible that they could shut him down at some point. Jordan Love did look very good last night, but your overall thoughts on Packers offensive options going forward?
I'm still very excited about my favorite player from the Packers, Christian Watson, who after last night commanded, I think since he's kind of made his debut, he's commanded, or since he started to take more of the snaps, he's commanded a 28% target share, which is really high. His air yards are off the charts. So I still think, and on that crosser, I mean, he showed what I loved about him on film on that crosser he took for a touchdown. If you get the ball to him in space, he has the breakaway speed to just house and beat angles all the time. So I think regardless who's at quarterback, Love or Rodgers, Watson will still be a fantasy option that I want to play every week. He's become a weekly play for me. And I know, again, like, look, it's a 28% target share, and that means, and he only had 6 targets last night, but that's partially because the Packers are, not the most pass heavy football team. And so despite all that, that was my key takeaway, that I'm still sticking with Christian Watson. And I'll say this about Jordan Love. I thought this was the best he's looked since he entered the NFL. He had a start earlier in his career against the Chiefs where Steve Spagnuolo was just like, all right, I'm stacking the box every play and I'm blitzing you almost every play. And he looked like helpless out there. In this game, he looked more in command. He still has the same traits that like drew the Packers to him, which are that really quick release, effortless throwing motion. The ball placement was a little off at times, and I think that's going to be the case. He wasn't one of my favorite prospects, but I felt like he looked a lot comfortable. So if he does need to operate that offense, I still have a little bit more faith in Christian Watson maintaining his fantasy value.
You don't even talk about like Aaron Jones. Christian Watson is your favorite fantasy asset on the Packers. Now, he's
outscored Aaron Jones in the last 3 weeks.
Okay, so you would look me with a straight face. You would look at me in the eye and say, "I'd rather have Christian Watson than Aaron Jones." That's what you're saying.
I mean, it's a tough call.
It's not a tough call. It's not a tough call. Come on. Even if you had to be right about that, there's no way you could take Christian Watson over Aaron Jones.
No, of course. You got to take Aaron Jones. I mean, of the people that we're not locking in as starters every week, the Dillons, the Cobbs, the Lazards. I said I would take him over Lazard 2 weeks ago, and I stand by that.
Okay, I have to come around on that one. He's just such a talented player. But what do you think, Jacob, if they end up going to Jordan Love? This is a great matchup at Chicago, and then they do have their bye. Rodgers, like I said, Rodgers says he wants to play, but just in general, what would this team look like without Aaron Rodgers? Would there be any must starts?
I think Dan is right. I agree with him that I'm still probably going to have Watson in the top 30 at the wide receiver position in a matchup against Chicago, and then in most neutral matchups, he's probably still going to be top 36 guy. I don't think it's going to be a significant drop-off from what we've seen with Rodgers, honestly. I could be wrong on that, but I think Love has played reasonably well when we've seen him have opportunities. And it's been kind of brutal in Green Bay lately, so I don't know if it's going to get significantly worse. So I think both him and Lazard are guys you can start if you need to, and you're obviously feeling more excited about Watson at this point.
Okay, so how about we'll go over to the Eagle? By the way, I disagree with like everything, but that's okay.
I disagree with.
I just think I'm going to go to Jordan Love's game log. The week he played at Kansas City last year, he started his only start, 19 of 34, 190 yards and a touchdown. Imagine Aaron Rodgers facing the Chiefs and throwing 34 passes for 190 yards. I remember, let me see the Devontae Adams stat line in that game. It was 14 targets. He turned that into 6 catches for 42 yards. It's just when you see these experienced quarterbacks who maybe they're not even playing that well, but they have such a command of the offense, you don't maybe even realize their value until they're out, like a Roethlisberger, for example.
Right.
I think it would be pretty bad, but I would say that at no point did I ever feel as encouraged about Jordan Love than last night. It's possible that he has just gotten better. Apparently on the broadcast, they said that he has cleaned up his fundamentals and has a better command of the offense. So maybe that could unlock something. But I absolutely, as a guy who has Aaron Jones in a lot of leagues, I absolutely am rooting for Aaron Rodgers to get healthy, stay healthy, hopefully get healed up after the bye week in week 14 and finish strong. But they are almost out of playoff contention. So
right.
It's a concern. Now the Eagles.
I will say this regards to that concern though, Adam, just one thing on that. If this is truly Aaron Rodgers' last season, like I think everybody's assuming it is, and I think he's hinted it will be, I feel like he'll make every effort to come back and play in it, even if the season is lost from a playoff standpoint. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. From the Eagles' perspective, anything jump out at you? You had an unbelievable game from Jalen Hurts, even though he kept losing touchdowns early in the game. But Dan, anything jump out at you from the Eagles?
Nothing that really stood out to me about the Eagles. I mean, I feel like with this passing game last week, at least, we saw it funnel almost not entirely, but at a really high rate. I think 38% through Smith and AJ Brown with Goddard out. This week, we saw other players get involved. Quez Watkins caught the touchdown. So I don't feel like we can count on it being as like kind of as defined of a passing game as like the Dolphins, where it's a lot of Waddle and Hill. So that I'm kind of toning back a bit of my optimism, I guess, for Devontae Smith to be an every week type of guy. I guess that would be my key takeaway in there.
I'll push back on that.
Yeah.
Push it back. We still saw 60% of the targets go to those two players this week. They just didn't get the touchdowns. And Devontae Smith, in the 2 games since Dallas Goedert has been injured, has a 38% target share and 55% air yardage share. He was targeted on 40% of Philly's first downs this past week. They were clearly, going to him. And they aren't using him in this like limiting short yardage role that they had been prior to the injury. It's been really weird what they've done, because like before Goddard got hurt, Smith was occupying this super short yardage role, which is not, I don't think, ideal for his skill set. And since the Goddard injury, they've moved AJ Brown into that role, whereas Smith has been working more downfield, and he hasn't had big results, but like the volume that we've seen for Smith these past 2 weeks is really, really exciting. So I think he's top 24 guy right now.
And that's how you get owned live on air. That's me getting owned by Jacob.
What can anyone make any sense of the route depth change? Because past 2 weeks, Devontae Smith's route depth is 9.7 yards. AJ Brown's is down to 8.1. It's basically just flipped from what we had seen previously. I have no idea why.
It could be the Goddard injury, right? They need someone.
Yeah.
AJ Brown always made more sense in that in-breaking route role.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I don't know why they were using Devontae that way to begin with.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because AJ Brown actually, I think he has 67 or fewer yards in 6 of his last 7 games.
Yeah.
Is that a red flag for you guys?
Yeah, especially if he's going to be running this short yardage role. Prior to these past 2 weeks, that's basically what we had seen from Devontae, where his yardage upside was super, super limited. He had 1 game where he had 90, but other than that, he had like 5 out of 6 games, Devontae Smith, with fewer than 60 yards, if I remember right. I don't know. It's been really weird. Like I was talking to Pat Fitzmaurice for Fantasy Pros a couple weeks ago, and he really expected Devontae to step into like a star role with Goddard out. He expected a lot of those short targets to funnel to him, and he has seen a huge increase of targets, but has been working down the field. It seems, I don't know, none of it has made sense. It seems like if AJ Brown is moving into this role and Goddard is out, it would seem like AJ Brown would be dominating the targets, but that's not really what we've seen.
Okay. I still feel like they're like misutilizing Devontae Smith anyway in this offense. Remember him at Bama, how they use so much of that like eye candy stuff with him, pre-snap motion, throw it to him right around the line of scrimmage, get blockers set up, and I don't see enough of that in this Eagles offense.
Yeah, pretty good matchup this week against Tennessee. Like they have been really susceptible to the deep ball, so I think we could see an explosive game from Smith this week.
Not as much lately, though. I mean,
no, that's true.
I could go into that stat, but it's like much better since their bye week, and I don't think any team has scored more than 20 points against them since their bye week, including the Chiefs, including the Bengals.
Yeah.
I believe in the Titans defense. It's definitely a good one. And what a game. I mean, that's going to be, we've got some serious fights. Like even Giants Commanders is a huge game next week, but you got 49ers Dolphins, you got Titans Eagles, you got Bills Patriots is interesting. I mean, I don't know the schedule, everything off the top of my head, but I think it's setting up to be a great week. Jets Vikings pretty big game when you look at the records. Chiefs Bengals. Hello, I knew there was one I was forgetting. Yeah, like next week is a crazy good week. All right, so that's it for the Philadelphia and Green Bay game. I mean, Miles Sanders was awesome. Obviously, I don't know that this really changes his fantasy value. It just happened to be you've seen his floor and his ceiling in the last few weeks. So 2 straight games of fewer than 6 PPR fantasy points. And then he goes off yesterday, Miles Sanders, for 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 3 catches after having 2 catches in his previous 5 games. So hopefully you started Miles Sanders. He was started in 74% of leagues. News and notes. So we're waiting to see on McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell. You can expect Mitchell to miss some time. Don't know about Christian McCaffrey. Hopefully we'll have more information as we get our waiver wire show going tomorrow. Travis Etienne was apparently cleared to return, but he did not return. So they were playing it cautiously with him. He should be good for the Detroit game. I do wonder, though, if maybe they take some work off his plate and maybe they throw the ball a little bit more, which would be great, obviously, for Trevor Lawrence. Michael Carter left with an ankle injury. He could miss some time. They have Bam Knight, Zadonovan Knight. They could have James Robinson back. What's your level of interest, guys, in Zadonovan White if Carter misses some time?
He looked really good. He had over 100 scrimmage yards, and the usage was good too.
Donovan Knight. I'm sorry. I knew I butchered his name. Donovan Knight. I meant to put it in the notes. And sorry about that. Zonovan Bam Knight is his name. Go ahead, Jacob. My bad.
Usage was good. He played well, and I think if Carter's out, and if I don't know, man, Robinson, it seems like it's done. Like maybe he'll come back and have a role, but like they've just been going further and further away from him. And I don't know if he's not healthy, just not the same guy. I don't know, but
I didn't really understand the fit in general with Robinson when they traded for him, right? Like he's not a one-cut zone runner. I think Zonovan Knight actually is, and he looked good getting vertical really fast in that Jets offense. So I don't see why they look at the film of Zonovan Knight and then turn back to Robinson based on what they've seen with him.
Jamar Chase expected to play this week. Allen Robinson's out for the season. Darnell Mooney's going to miss some time. Sam Darnold is going to start in week 14 after their bye at Seattle. That's all that they would commit to at this point. Probably going to get Kyle Allen next week again for the Texans. Of course, you have Aaron Rodgers with the injured rib. Some defensive injuries that are key. Chicago safety Eddie Jackson left with an injury. Also offensive line injuries. We'll throw those in here too. Both Dolphins starting tackles left with injuries. The important one is obviously Teron Armstead. I don't think they're going to have him for this game at San Francisco. And they allowed 4 sacks after Teron Armstead left the game. I don't think they allowed any before. But obviously franchise left tackle, recent offseason addition, and they may not have him. So that's a tough blow for the Dolphins. Tristan Wirfs. Tristan Wirfs has a high ankle sprain. He's the right tackle for the Bucs. And he's one of the few reliable guys they have on the line. So he has a high ankle sprain, and his timetable is unknown. 2 starters went out on the offensive line for the Chargers. Myles Garrett aggravated his shoulder. I thought that was pretty interesting. It was a shoulder he hurt in the car accident, and he was playing through a lot of pain. So hopefully Myles Garrett can get through that there at Houston this week. And Darnell Savage. A couple injuries last night at the safety position. Darnell Savage for the Packers. C.J. Gardner-Johnson for the Eagles. Minnesota cornerback Andrew Booth could be out for the season with a knee injury. He wasn't really playing a lot. He did play 94% of the snaps against the Cowboys, but wasn't a big contributor this season. It's still obviously a depth piece that the Vikings would love to have. And how about this? Your stat of the week. The Jaguars were 0-183 when trailing by 7 or more points in the last minute of regulation. And then they beat the Ravens on Sunday. They are now 1-183. Holy cow. All right, guys, I'm going to let you take it away with the stats. But the one thing that really jumped out, the playing time that jumped out for me as we look at some of the key stats from week 12, JuJu Smith-Schuster played 38% of the snaps. Does anybody know what the heck happened with JuJu Smith-Schuster?
No, it was weird. It's possible he's just not they were easing him in. But
Yeah, that's what you would think, but it was a concussion. It wasn't
right.
not to play down the severity of concussions, but they're not like ankles where you're either good or you're not. So and even Marquez Valdez-Scantling played something like 60% of the snaps, and he's usually a lot higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they just ran the ball so much. I don't know.
I think a lot of it had to do with the game script. Like they were up and they weren't trailing in this game, and they weren't really. There was at no point where you felt like the Chiefs had to really put their foot on the gas, because he did make that one big back shoulder catch where it like showed off his like improved rapport with Mahomes. He made the catch, got the first down, and like went right back to the sideline and put like the big coat on. So it's like that's like it for the day. So like when they needed him, they used him. But what stands out to me about the Chiefs usage, and I'm curious to get your take on this, Jacob. I really like what I'm starting to see from Sky Moore. They're finally starting to use him in this offense. That's now 10 catches in the last 2 games for Moore. He also had 2 design red zone touches. One was a throwback to Mahomes, but the other one was like the play we've seen them use, Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman and all these other players, that fast 3, where they use him as like a fast 3 or a fast 4, get him in pre-snap motion, get the ball out to him. So I'm really starting to think that Sky Moore could be potentially a useful player to have on your roster moving forward.
Yeah, back-to-back games where he's drawn targets on over 30% of his routes. Really exciting stuff from Sky.
All right, so that's a bit of the Chiefs passing game. I'm hoping we can trust JuJu Smith-Schuster against the Bengals, because that could be a shootout this week. All right, Jacob, take it away with these. Also, did you guys see Brian Robinson's hat?
Yeah, that was weird.
What the
heck? It was like 4 sizes bigger than his head, Jacob. And he said, my buddy runs a hat company. So
yeah, can we get a picture of that? Thomas, can you bring up Brian Robinson's hat? Just trust me. You just search for it. It's very easy to find. And we'll bring it up. It was one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen, including Dan's doing his Eddie Vedder impression before the show started. That was very funny. All right, what stats jumped out at you, JK Gibbs, JA Gibbs _23, Jacob Gibbs. That's your name. Wait, sorry, we have the hat. Look at this hat. I got it.
Trumps all.
Look at that. I've never seen anything like it.
Me either. Wow.
Okay, I'll remove the hat. Go ahead, Jacob.
Let's start in Arizona. So again, just insane usage for James Conner. 97% snap rate, 88% route involvement rate. The next highest at the running back position is 76%, 75, 72%. Like he's lapping the field. And Arizona's offense has looked a little bit better. And on that note, Marquise Brown is back and played a huge role. He was targeted on half of Arizona's first downs, which is huge. I didn't know how emphasized he would be when both him and Hopkins were back. It's just one data point, but at least what we have so far suggests that he's, maybe the guy that they're going to run the offense through. Hopkins still saw more air yardage, but Brown had an air yardage share above 30%. Target share was, I think, 28%. And then the interesting note was that they moved him into the slot with Rondale Moore out. 60% of his routes came from the slot. He'd never been above 50% in a game in his career. And that's interesting for him as a player. I don't know if it's going to, be the same when Rondale gets back, but it's interesting that he could be used primarily in the slot. We've never really seen that. And he's been more efficient from the slot than from the perimeter throughout his career, been targeted at a higher rate and averaged more yards per out run. So pretty exciting.
I don't know why they would, though. I mean, I feel like they got the bye this week, and as soon as Rondale Moore and or Greg Dortch is healthy, doesn't it just make sense that one of those guys plays the slot role?
I think so, but they do mix in a lot of guys in the slot, and they often run, multiple slots. So I think it's just an interesting expansion of his role. Like I said, I don't know if it's going to stick. That's not the main point. The main point is he's back. He played all the snaps. He led the team in targets.
Can I complain about something real quick here? And that's what this show's all about, right? Venting frustrations. This pitch count stuff. This is my least favorite thing. Dealing with weather and dealing with pitch counts. They said, Cliff Kingsbury said Marquise Brown was going to be on a pitch count. He played 98% of the snaps. What was his pitch count? 500? I mean, it's so hard to know when these guys are coming back from injury what to do with them. It's so hard to know how weather is going to impact fantasy. So those are Sunday morning, those are my least favorite starter sit questions. You have to ask them. I get it. But they're the hardest ones to answer because I just have no idea. I never in a million years thought Marquise Brown was going to play all but like 2 snaps yesterday. So sorry, that's just me venting.
No, that's frustrating because you are you want to be giving an informed opinion, and sometimes you're
Right.
just guessing when it comes to that stuff, and that sucks. So I also wanted to mention real quick that Kenneth Walker's route involvement rate was down. We'd seen his receiving role expanded, and his targets were way up the previous game for Seattle. And this was a great matchup for him to be targeted. The Raiders have allowed the highest target per route run rate to the running back position this year, but he only saw one target. And his route involvement rate was still above 50%, which isn't bad, but it's not what we saw previously. So that's frustrating. On that note, Kyron Williams for the Rams, the rookie running back that they've been so excited to get back all year, came and immediately played a huge role here. He had a 72% route involvement rate, which was the 5th highest at the running back position this week. Played 71% of the snaps and had more rushing attempts than Cam Akers, which really surprised me. I expected him to have the passing down role. I did not expect him to just straight up out touch Cam Akers on early downs. He didn't look very good. And the Rams are not very good, obviously. So I really don't know how much appeal there really is here, but the usage was there.
Oh boy, what a bad team they are. I mean,
Yeah.
terrible offense, lines beat up. Allen Robinson's out for the year. Like, that is not a huge deal, but gosh, they're awful. I wanted to add something on Ken Walker because I was looking into him this morning. So of all running backs with 80 or more carries, I think there are 42 of them. He is second to last in percentage of carries for 0 or negative yards. And that is, he has the highest percentage.
Mm-hmm.
There's only James Robinson is the only running back with a higher percentage of carries that have gone for 0 or negative yards than Ken Walker. Looking at all running backs with a minimum of 80 carries this year, he is dead last, I believe, in carries that have gone for 5 or more yards. So a percentage of carries that have gone for 5 or more yards. It's 42nd out of 42nd. So that surprised me. The area where Ken Walker does measure very well is the explosive plays. He's 4th in explosive run rate, which is carries of 12 or more yards, according to True Media. Again, of all running backs with 80 or more carries. So, he's saving himself with big plays. A big play, according to True Media, is 12 or more yards. His first carry of the game was a 12-yard touchdown, and it was gorgeous. After that, he had, I think, 13 carries for 14 yards, something like that. Yeah, 13 carries for 14 yards and a touchdown. So it's a little concerning with Ken Walker here, especially if you can't rely on that role in the passing game. There's just a lot of negative carries. I'm not at Dameon Pierce level with Ken Walker. I don't know. Dan, I don't know how you feel about Ken Walker. I think he's terrific, but we are seeing a lot of really bad nothing carries for him. And if he doesn't get the big play, then it's a little rocky. Yeah,
one of my biggest issues with Ken Walker from what I've seen is they're just not really running that diverse of a run scheme there in Seattle. It's Shane Waldron. He comes from that coaching tree. It's a lot of zone. It's a lot of outside zone. And when outside zone is working well, it's working great. Earlier in the season, it looked great with Penny. When Walker first hit the scene, it looked great. And now teams are figuring out a way to stop that outside zone. I thought the Giants kind of put a little bit of a blueprint on there. And since then, it's been tough for the Seattle defense. The Raiders, who are not really known as a good run defense, completely shut that outside zone run game down. It's not a very diverse scheme. We're not seeing a lot of interesting elements like use some power gap or get him to the perimeter often. So I just feel like right now with pitches and stuff like that and pin pull. So I just feel like right now it's not the run game, the blocking scheme to me in the run game itself is not really operating in sync. So it's less Walker for me talent wise and more just I'm not feeling great about the Seattle run game.
What stats did you want to highlight, Mr. Schneier?
Well, I want to start with a film observation because that's kind of where my specialty really lies anyway over the stats. Jacobs is the stat guy. I just try to compete with him and I never, live up to the hype and live up to Jacobs' impressive, stat digging week to week basis. But I do think I can come up with some decent film observations. And today I had the opportunity to go back and watch the Jacksonville Jaguars offense on film. Why did I do that? Well, on the mailbag episode last week, Adam and I were posed with a question and a bet against this, and look, the Ravens defense had been really good since Roquan Smith was traded to them. You could talk about early in the season when they gave up that huge comeback to the Dolphins and all those things, but they had really tightened up since then. So someone's bet Adam and I that Trevor Lawrence would score 30 fantasy points. And Adam and I were like, well, bet our lives that this won't happen, basically. Of course, he did score that 30 plus range. And if you watch the film, what I really like about Trevor Lawrence and what I saw with that Jaguars passing game, they started to take advantage of what he does best as a quarterback coming out of this bye week. And what is that? Well, it's his ability to throw velocity and ball placement and anticipation outside the hashes. So that means like you have the hash marks in the NFL. You have the 40. Just think of it like a yard line, the 40-yard line, the 40-yard line. A lot of throws are thrown in between that for quarterbacks. The quarterbacks who can throw velocity and touch outside, those are known as the NFL throws. Those are the guys who you think have like the elite arm talent. Those are the guys who can challenge defenses in a way that's hard to stop. And that's what we saw with the Ravens. They had a tough time stopping Lawrence because he was throwing so consistently with so much velocity outside the numbers. And one of the key benefactors of that was Zay Jones. His role has changed. I'd love to get your take on this, Jacob, but his role changed a lot coming out of the bye week. They start to finally utilize him outside the numbers and in that intermediate to deep range. One of the best throws of the game during that comeback was an outside the numbers throw outside the left hash to Zay Jones, where Lawrence released it before he really got to his spot, way before he got it out of his break. So I think right now what the Jaguars and Doug Peterson did during the bye week is figure out what Lawrence does best as a quarterback and start to utilize that. And what he does best is hardest to stop in the NFL. It is very hard to play zone against quarterbacks who can consistently challenge outside the hash marks in the intermediate and deep areas of the field. So I'm very excited about what I saw with Lawrence in this past game. I'm very excited about them moving forward.
Cool. That was pretty good. That was pretty good film review.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
They moved Christian Kirk, like his slot rate was up and his average depth of target was down this week. And we have seen Zay Jones has had a really low ADOT, which is uncharacteristic for what we've seen from the rest of his career. His ADOT prior to this past week was like 7.5 yards. This week it was up around 10, and Kirk's was down. And so, yeah, it's like, I'm glad that you saw that on film as well. It's exciting to see him being used more down the perimeter. And yeah, the usage this week was incredible.
Well, it's not that exciting for me, who likes Kirk quite a bit.
But,
well, I would say this: Zay Jones is someone who I'm targeting on all my waiver wires after watching that tape.
I benched him in a league, and to be fair, I mean the Ravens defense. It's not like they played poorly until that final drive. One of the touchdowns was, I think, a fumble recovery about the 15-yard line or something like that. So that's what the Jaguars scored. So. But Zay Jones was having a huge game the entire time, and he's had 8 or more targets in 6 games, and he scored double-digit PPR fantasy points in 5 of those 6 games. And it always correlates with how many pass attempts Trevor Lawrence throws. And I think they're probably going to have to, like, the next 2 opponents for Zay Jones are the Titans and the Lions, or Lions and the Titans in that order. They are 3rd and 4th in most wide receiver targets per game, seen defensively. So, I think Zay Jones is pretty interesting. Any other filmy stuff? By the way, if you're the film guy and Jacob's the stat guy, what the hell am I?
You're the guy, Adam. You do it all. You're the utility guy.
Damn
You're
right.
The utility guy. You're the utility guy.
From being the guy to the utility guy is actually from Aaron Judge into who would be into Isiah Kiner-Falefa. So
no. You're one of the better utility guys out there. So let's keep it there. As far as film, yeah, great. No, I meant that nicely. As far as film goes, that was kind of the only tape I got a chance to get to today. But I have a couple, just outside of that, stats that I researched today to write the newsletter for FFT. So one thing I really wanted to point to is Rachaad White, because there was some speculation that second year back Keyshawn Vaughn could kind of like split the role with White or play a lot of the passing downs, because look, he's year 2. And Rachaad White is a rookie, and Tom Brady's Tom Brady. He wants to have running backs in there who are good in pass pro, who know what they're doing. That just simply wasn't the case. I mean, he played 90% of the snaps, Rachaad White. He had 14 carries. Vaughn just had 4. He had 73% route participation. So he was really used as a route runner, not as a blocker on passing downs. 21% target share was whopping good.
Yeah.
And he handled over 80% of the team's short yardage, 85% of the long distance downs. He didn't miss a single snap in the 2-minute offense. So I don't know if Fournette is going to miss another week, but if he does, Rachaad White remains a locked-in RB1. All he needed on that stat line was a touchdown to put him over the top there. I know, he didn't get it this week, but that's not to say it won't happen next week. And even once Fournette comes back, Adam and Jacob, I think that he's earned himself at least kind of like a 40-50% share moving forward. This could really hurt Fournette.
Oh yeah, big time. I think they said they were going to ride the hot hand. He's done nothing to not be the hot hand, and he had a great 9 catches. Is insane, but good day for Rachaad White. Latavius Murray was another guy who played a whole bunch of snaps, played over 80%. Kyron Williams played 70%. Jacob talked about him. So
We got to talk about Garrett Wilson too, right? I mean,
it's part of our big topics.
Okay.
So the only other thing I wanted to mention was DJ Moore really outplayed Patrick Surtain. He had a lot of yardage on Surtain. He had the touchdown on Surtain. He had a 20-yard catch against him, and then he had, I think, a 52-yard catch against him at the very end of the game. And we just wanted to bring that up. He's going into his bye, but Surtain has had a bit of a rough stretch here. He got schooled on that Devontae Adams touchdown in overtime that lost them the game, and did not really do a good enough job on DJ Moore, who, despite, I think, Sam Darnold threw 19 passes, DJ Moore had a big game, about 100 yards and a touchdown. Go ahead.
Two that are quick. I wanted to mention that Treylon Burks did run more routes than Nick Westbrook-Akine this week, which he didn't the week before. He just drew targets at a really high rate the week before, but he's third on the team in routes. This week, he was right up there, Robert Woods, in terms of routes run, and he had 108 air yards. So really exciting stuff for him. And then I just want to highlight the Cleveland guys again, because, I mean, maybe at this point it's too late to buy them. They might be properly valued, but we saw David Njoku's his usage was a lot better this week. He's not being eased in anymore. He's playing the full role. And then Amari Cooper, over the past couple of weeks, has started to really take back command, as Donovan Peoples-Jones had legitimately started to cut into Amari's role for like a month and a half straight. But the last 2 weeks, it's been pretty much all Amari's look like the alpha. And if these two guys are going to play those roles with Deshaun Watson back, if Watson is even like 80, 85% of what we've seen in years past, Amari Cooper is like a top 8, top 10 wide receiver, and Njoku is like a top 6 tight end.
Njoku, just to add some numbers to that, Njoku had a 22% target share. That's an incredibly high rate. And 78% route participation rate is even more interesting to me, because that means he, when he was on the field, he wasn't really used as a blocker. He was used as a receiver.
You guys gotta give him the respect he deserves and call him by his name, which is Njoku. I can't let my University of Miami guy.
What did I say? Njoku?
Njoku. A lot of people are calling him Njoku.
Njoku.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna take a break here. Get to our big topics when we come back. Josh Jacobs, he's good. Deshaun Watson, he's good. Garrett Wilson is good. Alvin Kamara and Saquon Barkley, they are terrible, of course. We'll tell you all about it right after this on Fantasy Football Today. Big topic number 1 comes from Sean Collender. Why is Josh Jacobs the best? How is the entire industry wrong on Josh Jacobs? How can we avoid the Josh Jacobs situations moving forward? Who is next year's Josh Jacobs? So that's what he asks.
Great question.
Right now, he is number 1 running back in non and half PPR. He is number 2 in full PPR, and he is coming off a 303-yard game with 2 touchdowns and 48.3 PPR fantasy points. Dan, your thoughts on Josh Jacobs?
Yes, obviously, as somebody who was off Josh Jacobs this year, off him last offseason, I was right. Off him this offseason, I was wrong. What we can avoid is this. Maybe we can start to weigh the factors a little differently. So the reason why I was off Josh Jacobs was because of the coaching change. Josh McDaniels comes over. He comes from New England. They had never really run a one-back system ever, except for like the Corey Dillon years, which is like the mid-2000s with Bill Belichick. And Josh McDaniels was his coordinator for all but those that short stint with the Broncos for McDaniels. And so we even saw the buzz, right? During training camp, he was using multiple backs. They had Brandon Bolden on the roster. Amir Abdullah was a guarantee to take the passing downs. And you thought maybe Zamir White, who they handpicked that staff, would ultimately eat into Jacobs' early down role. Now, we factored all that in really heavily. We also factored in, and this is the one that really stands out to me, that they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. Mm-hmm. But might that have actually been a good thing for his fantasy value, right? If you don't pick up his 5th-year option, you're more willing probably as a coaching staff to run him into the ground in better, and those aren't the best way to describe it. It's a kind of a brute way to describe that, but to kind of give him that massive workload. And that's what we're seeing now. For the first time in Josh McDaniels' really career as a coordinator and as a coach, he's leaned on one back. And so that's the one factor that stands out to me. The other one is this. Josh Jacobs, I always come back to this when I mess with Jacobs. Jacobs is still because somebody posted about this, from a dynasty standpoint. I mean, I remember early in September, it might've been Heath, and it really jumped out to me. We're like, we are so quick to rule out these backs, but he's still on his rookie contract. He was a first-round pick for a reason, because NFL scouts felt like he had the tools to be an every down back. And he's still really young. What is Josh Jacobs, 24, 25 right now? I believe. Yeah, I think he's 24 years old. So maybe, just maybe, we look at the draft pedigree, we look at the age, we look at the fact that he wasn't really, didn't have high usage rates, and we just think about it differently moving forward. That's the only thing I can think of, because I do put a lot of weight generally on the coaching and the tendencies of the coaching, and in this case, it just totally backfired.
Yeah, I think you outlined it really well. Another thing with Jacobs is, do you remember that in the Hall of Fame game he was playing, and it's just like,
Yeah,
what?
that killed
What
us
is
too,
this?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that I didn't really take all that seriously, but
just another thing. It just like all added up, and everybody got so down on him.
no, look, he really. I know that the previous 2 years he had finished, I think around an RB12, something like
But
that.
those are like cumulative stats. Those are like the guys you never wanted. He was like the
No,
guy
it was
you never
per
wanted.
game. It was per game, but
I
still,
know,
it
but
wasn't
it's
that
okay.
impressive. It,
Right.
the per carry, the explosive plays. I like guys who can make big plays. And then so you're looking at a guy who was really needed a lot of volume because he wasn't making big plays 2 years in a row. Had a terrible offensive line, and this year they're 26th in run blocking according to PFF. So that hasn't changed. We thought for sure that he was not going to be an every down back. I mean, like every single report indicated that.
Right.
So we thought he was, like a round 5 pick, round 6 maybe, if you really didn't like Josh Jacobs. It was not like we were completely avoiding him. And when you say who's the next one, I think it's pretty unlikely that I just don't think there's going to be a repeat. I think it's like saying who's the next Cooper Kupp. It's not that easy to do. He's having an incredibly good season. Everyone was wrong. I don't know that we were wrong in our thought process. I think there was much more evidence against him than for him.
Right.
And I guess, yeah, I guess, okay. Last thing is like, you should probably favor a guy like Josh Jacobs, who has the pedigree, and his rookie season, he was really good, over someone like Myles Gaskin and Mike Davis. Those guys who might have better opportunities in a particular year, but we don't think they're very good at all.
Right.
That could be the mistake we made. That's it.
Yeah. And I would say one thing to think about moving forward. I don't want to cut you off, Jacob. I'll let you speak after this. But one thing to think about moving forward is I was equally as concerned with that Raiders offensive line. And you mentioned it, Adam. It hasn't really improved, at least according to Pro Football Focus. But maybe moving forward, one thing we consider is what's more impactful on a running back? The offensive line rankings according to Pro Football Focus, or the addition of a receiver, a true X receiver, arguably one of the best in the game, like Davante Adams, and what that could mean schematically on the other side of the ball. Well, defenses are playing their safeties further back. Defenses are using extra defensive backs or linebackers in bracket coverage to assign to Davante Adams on every play, and that opens up one gap in the run lane or something like that to really make things easier for a running back. So maybe we considered like, okay, Davante Adams is there, or if some team makes a massive acquisition at wide receiver like that, what will it do for the run game? Because I think we're seeing something similar in Miami, right? Like last year, Miami's running backs were an albatross. I remember every week, nobody was creating anything in that run game for Miami. And we not only could we not figure out a running back to start, we always kept saying like, oh my God, this offensive line is so bad. We can never trust a Miami running back. They didn't really prove that offensive line all that much. Terron Armstead's great, but the numbers haven't shown they've improved that much. But what's happening? Well, teams are playing safeties 20 yards. Teams are playing safeties and corners like 15 yards at least off the ball because of Hill and Waddle, and it opens up a lot in the run game.
Okay.
Yep, that's a good point. Jacobs hasn't faced stack boxes nearly as much as he has in the past, which I think is interesting because at times this year the Raiders' offense has completely run through him. But he's below the league average in the percentage of his runs that he's faced stack boxes, which I think just kind of attests to Dan's point about Davante Adams making such a big impact. And then if I were to throw out two names who are like possibly next year's Josh Jacobs, I think Jonathan Taylor and Najee Harris both make sense. I don't think Najee's as good of a runner as Jacobs. I don't know if Jonathan Taylor is either, but he might be. But they're both guys who we were really, really excited about. And then their efficiency numbers have dropped off as they played through injuries. Their offensive line has been a problem, and we could easily see them not projected for a 3-down role next year, but they also could end up just being the entire, force of their offense, everything running through those guys, and surprisingly good for fantasy, which I don't know. There were just two names that stuck out to me.
All right, let's go to Rich McElhaney. Are you starting Deshaun Watson? Who are you starting over Deshaun Watson next week? I'm thinking of starting Watson over Josh Allen. I mean, whichever way the question is worded, the question is about Deshaun Watson. So he is coming back this week to face his old team, the Houston Texans. And Jacob, what are your expectations for Deshaun Watson?
I've got him at QB8 currently, so I would not start him over Josh Allen, but I would start him over Geno, Dak Prescott, Tom Brady, Derek Carr, those guys. And I think you can make a case, I guess, over like Tua against San Francisco, but I wouldn't start him over Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow. Lamar Jackson versus Denver, maybe? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would start him over Lamar Jackson against Denver
yeah.
for sure. I would also start him over Tua against San Fran, mostly because I'm really alarmed by the injuries at the offensive tackle positions for Tua and that Dolphins offense against the 49ers front. But otherwise, I think I'm
start him
aligned
over
with you.
Tua Tagovailoa?
Yes, I would.
Oh boy,
I don't like that matchup for Tua. That San Fran D line is, if not the best, the set. And now you're. I mean, if Terran Armstead plays and there are others, I forgot who was. I can't believe I don't know.
Terran Armstead is not going to play, and their right tackle is the guy who's
Hurst. Who was it?
Jackson,
right,
I think. Austin Jackson.
Oh yeah, Austin Jackson.
He's barely played all
and
year,
they moved him from like left guard to right. Yeah, he's not a good option anyway. That scares me though, because Tua's a left-handed quarterback, doesn't really have any option at right tackle or left tackle for this week against the best front. I'd start him over Tua.
Well, I just don't know what to expect from him. I mean, first of all, this is a great situation that he's walking into. If you just look at Jacoby Brissett, I mean, he's having a career year, and Baker Mayfield, I think it's pretty obvious, is better in Cleveland than in Carolina. So it might just be a really good scheme. I know, Dan, you've talked very glowingly about the scheme there. You've got Cooper, he's either been throwing at Hopkins, but then the 1 year where he didn't have Hopkins, he was throwing to Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. He threw for 5,000 yards almost, led the league in passing. So he's got a decent receiving core. And the difference this year is that they are definitely throwing the ball more than they ever did. This was a team that was usually bottom 5 in pass attempts. They're 18th in pass attempts per game because they're giving up the third most.
Defense stinks.
Yep. That's not going to be the case this week against the Texans. I would not love him so much against the Texans because teams don't throw against the Texans. They run, and this is the Browns. Nick Chubb is going to go crazy. However, it's his first game in a year and a half. He's facing the Texans. You got to figure they want to get him scored some points against his old team, right? Like there's definitely a storyline there that's pretty intriguing. So I would start Tua over him, but I would definitely start him over Lamar Jackson. Gibbs, you got to break the tie here. Tua or Deshaun Watson?
I have Tua ranked one spot ahead of him, but I think it's really, really close, and I'm probably going to end up moving Deshaun ahead of him.
Okay, we got some very heavy talk in the in the chat today. My goodness.
What is it?
It's very strange. So let's just you can talk about whatever you want, but it's a little strange. But this is why you should be watching on YouTube, everybody. All right. So what was I gonna say? What is this comment about? This isn't Sandlot Pickup Family Turkey Bowl, Adam. What are you talking about, Rush, man? What does that mean?
What is he talking about?
Is that in regards to what I said about Deshaun Watson? Like scoring against the Texans? You don't think that he's going to be extra motivated to score touchdowns against the Texans? Did you see how that thing ended? People like scoring against teams that they used to play for. This is a big deal for Deshaun Watson, I would imagine. The bigger question, though, that I didn't address is, what percentage of Deshaun Watson is he going to be playing to? He hasn't played in so long. It is a brand new system. He didn't really, have a lot of preseason run and all that stuff. So is he just going back to being the top 5 quarterback he's been basically every year, or top 6 per game? Or is there going to be an acclimation period? Give me your 30-second thoughts on that. We can move on.
I think there's a chance there could be a 1, maybe 2 game acclimation period. But after that, I'll go because, like you said, I like his weapons. Cooper, Njoku. Wait, what is it?
No.
Cooper, Njoku, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Love the offensive line. Love Kevin Stefanski calling and designing plays. And more importantly than that, love the game script potential. Like you mentioned earlier, they're throwing more than they ever had to because their defense stinks this year. They can't stop anybody in the run game. And so all of those factors lead me to believe that after a couple games where he gets the rapport down with these receivers, gets actual game reps with them, he could be like a fantasy star for the playoffs. I'm very high on his upside.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I think upside wise, like he could be one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy. He's got really great weapons there. But I am projecting him at about 85% of the player that we've seen in the past, at least to start out here, because he just hasn't played football in so long.
Yeah. Yep. All right. And we'll move on to our next topic here. It's about two struggling running backs. It's from Only Meat. Still start your studs, Kamara and Barkley. So Kamara is at Tampa Bay this week. Barkley has Washington. So those are not easy matchups. Both of them are really struggling. Kamara has been worse than Barkley. How about Barkley? His last 6 games, he is averaging 3.6 yards per carry. He has 2 carries of 20 or more yards in those 6 games, whereas in his first 5 games, Barkley averaged 5.5 yards per carry and had 5 carries of 20 or more yards. Excuse me, guys. Do you think that Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara in general are starts in week 12? Again, it is Barkley against the Commanders and Kamara at the Bucs.
Kamara still is. I have him, I think, at running back 13 or 14 this week. And Barkley is right in that range, but I am definitely worried about it. Dan and I were tweeting about this, and you pointed it out. He has been significantly worse over the second half of the season. He's avoiding tackles at like half the rate that he was early in the season, not rushing for explosive plays. And this is a terrible matchup. Washington Stevens has been really good lately, and they're better against the run than they're against the pass. So yeah, Saquon, you're betting on volume, but that's the other thing. His underlying volume rates aren't as strong as they were earlier in the year either. His route involvement rate has been down for like a month and a half.
Yeah.
And he already wasn't drawing targets at a high per route rate. And so like now that he also has fewer routes, like it's tough to project him for more than 3 or 4 targets on any given week. And this is Washington even plays a ton of man. So yeah, that running back
5 to 6 targets in their last 3 losses each game. So they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. He's had 5 to 6 targets in all 3 games. So,
yeah,
that helps.
He's actually been targeted much higher per route rate lately, which I think might be kind of fluky. And so like if he doesn't have the routes and that rate normalizes to what we saw prior to that, then like it could be really bad.
But do you think that has anything to do with Wan'Dale Robinson being out last week, with Wan'Dale Robinson missing time in general? I don't know. All right, well, look, 3-4 catches is basically, a good day for Saquon Barkley. So we can just end it there. What's your take on these two guys, Dan?
I'm actually a lot higher moving forward on Barkley than Kamara, and I'm not high on either of these players given the factors. I'll start with Kamara. Kamara saw just 32% of the Saints' total carries this week. He's just not a workhorse back. So then if you don't have a workhorse back, you need him to be a dynamo as a receiver. He had 6 receptions for 37 yards. The targets are there. He had 7 targets, but these are bad targets. They're not utilizing him down the field. Andy Dalton is not a good thrower of the football at this point, and he's not a good player to be operating that offense. It's a insanely low ceiling offense, and I just don't have any interest. Not to say the Giants are a high ceiling offense, but they feel like a much higher ceiling offense than the Saints to me right now, or at least considerably higher when you also factor in the volume. Now, as far as Barkley goes, there are reasons to be optimistic on the horizon. So I'll start with those before getting into the negatives. The reasons to be optimistic are the Giants are getting a lot healthier on their offensive line. And more importantly, they might be getting Daniel Bellinger back, the tight end. The running game really fell off completely once Daniel Bellinger was out of the mix because they don't have any other tight ends who can block the way he can. They also lost Evan Neal. That hurt them. And the injuries on the interior offensive line. They've had a revolving door there. But there is also on the negative side, which I said I promised I'll get to, if you look at every single trend as Jacob broke down, yards over expected has been unbelievably bad during this stretch versus in the early season where he was way above yards over expected yards. And it really started when he had that shoulder injury earlier this season against the Green Bay Packers. That's when the downfill started. And he doesn't talk about it. The Giants aren't talking about the injury. There's nothing on it, but you can tell that he's not running with the same juice. You can tell that, it's not like he's not as physical. It's just like, he doesn't look the same out there right now when you watch him on tape. And I think every Giants fan who's watched the tape along with us on our podcast, Big Blue Banner, quick shout out because we break down the tape. But Nick, myself, and myself and my co-host both agree he has not looked the same on tape. So I think the issue is like the injury situation with Saquon Barkley moving forward. So I can't really be too high on either, but I'm definitely going to take the guy with offensive line reinforcements coming back with actual volume versus Kamara, who, doesn't even get 32% of his carries in a week.
And Barkley at least has 15 or more fantasy points in all but 2 games this year. Like Kamara would kill for 15 fantasy points lately. But, some of that is just touchdowns. Like Barkley's scoring touchdowns and Kamara has scored touchdowns in 1 game all year. He scored 3 touchdowns against the Raiders. Those are his only touchdowns of the season. But last week, Jacob, I pointed out that when they have gotten to the 5-yard line, it's been rare. But he has been the guy in the game, and he, of course, fumbled at the 1-yard line in this game on a catch. Here's the biggest number that I'm looking at for Alvin Kamara. Let me just tell you that the Carolina Panthers are last in the NFL with 56.4 plays per game. In this 4-game stretch for Alvin Kamara, where he's been, pretty bad, these Saints are averaging 51 plays per game. That is pathetic. That is 5 below the Panthers' season average, which is worse than the NFL. So those types of things, I feel like that will normalize a little bit. You can't be that bad in plays per game. And that could be 4 extra touches or something like that. Maybe, from maybe 3 extra touches, but maybe that's enough to give you something from Kamara. So what did you say? You had him like in the 13 to 15 range, those guys, both of them?
Yeah, that's a really good point that you just brought up on the Saints' overall offensive play volume. I knew it had been bad. I didn't realize it was that bad for an extended period like that.
Yeah. So, I think things could get better for these guys, but there's a lot of really interesting factors at play. That was a very good Giants breakdown there, Dan. So thank you for that. From Ryan Cook.
Can we get Andy Dalton? Can we get Andy Dalton out of here? Like,
I know,
something
right?
that might realistically happen or no?
What is going on with this Andy Dalton situation? He's not playing well. Why is he starting?
Foot. I'm 100% convinced. That's what Dennis Allen basically said. He said Jameis Winston is not going to be 100% this year because of his foot. And I do not think there's any reason why he'd be sticking with Andy Dalton otherwise.
Maybe they're tanking. No, they're not even taking. They don't even have their draft pick. They traded to the Eagles.
Yeah. All right, from Ryan Cook. So I need to be quick on this, guys. I'm sorry, but he wants circle of trust for Garrett Wilson, Isiah Pacheco, and Gus Edwards. So 0 to 10 on the trust-o-meter. 10 is a complete trust. 0 is zero trust. Garrett Wilson, Pacheco, and Gus Edwards. Give me a number for each, Jacob.
Garrett Wilson, the player, I'm going 9 or 10. In terms of like his fantasy outlook week to week on the Jets, we're going to go with a 7. Pacheco, any week that the Chiefs are probably going to play with a lead, which is most weeks, he's like a 7 or an 8. He had 12 red zone touches this week. 12. The next highest was 7. Gus Edwards, 6. He came back and dominated the rushing share. Played over half the snaps, which is great. First game back. Yeah.
What was your number on Pacheco?
7.
So 2 7s and a 6?
Yeah.
Okay. Dan?
I'm going to go with an 8 for Garrett Wilson. Obviously, the talent would be a 9 or a 10 for me, but the Jets pass situation I don't think will look as good as it looked against a Bears defense that's been awful in basically every category. Pacheco is somebody I talked about last podcast loving, and I know you weren't as high on him, Adam, but like Jacob said, this is the Chiefs offense, and he's getting all those red zone touches, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is now on IR. I did see a little bit of Ronald Jones. That was interesting, but I'll go 8 on Pacheco. I'm high there, too. And then the last player, who was that again? So bad my memory is. Gus Edwards. I'll give a 7 there. As long as he doesn't fumble, he should still. They proved like once he came back, like it's his job. It's Kenyon Drake's not going to mix in, but the fumble maybe cost them the game. So if he starts to fumble, puts another ball on the ground, that's when I would lower that all the way down to like a 3.
J.K. Dobbins is going to practice this week. I don't expect him to play this week, but his return could be on the horizon, which would cut into Gus Edwards' work. I'll
believe it when I see it with Dobbins.
So this is very format specific. Okay.
Okay.
So Garrett Wilson's a 7 in any format. Heath has been asking, believe it or not, he's a top 20 wide receiver rest of season as long as Zach Wilson isn't the quarterback. Think about the guys who we talk about as top 20, right? We're talking JuJu, we're talking Olave, we're talking Terry McLaurin, Garrett Wilson's in that mix, Christian Kirk. I mean, there are not even close to 20 wide receivers who you just trust every week. So Garrett Wilson is absolutely in that group. And looking at wide receiver 20 in full PPR, it's averaging about a point per game less than each of the previous 2 years. It's a bad year for wide receivers. So in that regard, I do trust Garrett Wilson. I'll just say Mike White was not anything special yesterday. His air yards per pass attempt were 5.75, which would be the lowest in football if it were for a full season. it'll be a little higher than that going forward, but he was just very, very safe. Good for him.
But
and then
he does offer some. Yeah, go ahead.
Of course, you had the safety Eddie Jackson hurting his foot on the Garrett Wilson touchdown that led to 37 yards after the catch on a touchdown with the safety laying on the ground. So I just want to say, like, it was an encouraging start, but I am not even close to considering Mike White. If you're thinking about him off the waiver wire, think again. I do not think that, although the Vikings suck, and then he's got the Bills, who are extremely
Lions too are coming up.
Lions schedule's great, but that's more for Wilson for me than White. For the other two guys in a full PPR league, Pacheco and Gus Edwards are 3 or 4s for me. Full PPR.
Pacheco.
In his last 3 games, Pacheco in full PPR has been RB31, RB22. And this week, he had 22 carries. He scored a touchdown, and he was RB15. So if he doesn't score, he's got 1 catch in his last 3 games. I think he has 3 catches on the season. They don't usually run this much. So I think full PPR specifically, I'm not starting him. And Gus Edwards is basically the same exact thing. Oh, there you go.
Nice.
Were you going to say something?
No, I like it.
Okay, now non-PPR, half PPR, much more interested in Pacheco and Gus Edwards. I'd prefer Pacheco because I think Dobbins could be a pain in the butt for Gus Edwards. Guys,
Agreed.
Thank you. Good show. Good to have you guys back together again.
To be back. Yep.
All right, so J.K. Dobbins is just coming in. He's going to practice this week. That means his window is open. He's got
Joe Mixon remains in the concussion protocol, by the way. That just popped across the news tracker.
Yeah, I don't like that. I need me some Mixon. My seasons are in the balance.
Shout out to the Badgers, by the way, as you're looking at this big W. They just hired Luke Fickell to be their new head coach. And let me tell you, this is one of the most exciting hires I've ever had as a fan of this team.
Okay. Good luck to you. This is how I felt a year ago when the Hurricanes hired Ball, and now we're 5-7. So we'll talk to y'all tomorrow with the waiver wire on Fantasy Football Today.